Mhm. Well, I would imagine in these conversations that are taking place in Riyadh, in preparation for conversations that are taking place between Putin and Donald Trump, that the U.S. has something in mind in regards to what it wants from Putin. What do you think that is? Meaning, what do you think that when they shake hands, they say, we come to an agreement, this is what we're going to do for European security going forward. What does Putin give in that conversation from the standpoint of what Trump wants out of Putin in order for him to say, we've saved face, this works, we can move forward with this?
Well, I think there will be a border drawn. I mean, that's really ultimately the issue. So we have the republics that have declared independence from Ukraine, that have now voted to join with Russia. Where is the border going to be? That's probably going to be the primary point of contention in the talks, right? Ukraine thinks that their borders go all the way, that Crimea belongs to them, that all of these republics are Ukrainian territory. They've said that winning in the war means that every inch of modern Ukraine, that every inch of it is under the control of Kiev. Now, Russian President Putin pointed out that the very borders of Ukraine were drawn by the Soviet Union. And that, there was the Russian Empire originally, and that it was all just part of the Russian Empire, and Ukraine was like a region. Then after the Russian Revolution, Lenin drew borders, and then Stalin expanded those borders, and then Khrushchev expanded those borders, and the borders of Ukraine have been expanding as a result of the Soviet Union. When they were part of the Soviet Union, they were all the same country anyway. The borders of what you call Ukraine have expanded and expanded to the time when, the Soviet Union fell. Crimea was part of Ukraine, etc. So, Ukrainian nationalism, this perspective that views Ukrainians as an inherent nationality, that are very opposed to Russia, that argue that they must assert their independence from Russia. It has this notion that we must be a separate country, that we and the Russians have a diametrically opposed history, etc. And yet they're using borders that are were drawn by the Soviet Union, which they hate so much. And it was the Soviet Union that expanded the territory of Ukraine and to what it is, what it was at the time this war began. And so, Ukraine has maintained that Crimea belongs to them, that all these republics belong to them. And that is going to be the primary point of contention at the talks. Where is the border going to be drawn? I think that that border will be drawn in a way that Ukraine doesn't, lose everything. Obviously, it doesn't lose all of that territory, but it's also going to be drawn in a way that ensures Russia's security and ensures security for the people of the regions that declared independence. There are also going to be recognitions of what rights Ukraine has in terms of military facilities, right? So does Ukraine have the right to have these biolabs? Does Ukraine have the right to have this kind of military force or that kind of military force? Now, Trump has already said that Ukraine will not join NATO. And that's very important because that was a real red line that Russia drawn, that Ukraine joining NATO. But I think, what kind of military force will Ukraine be able to maintain, and will Russia have to respect? Right? I mean, will it be in writing that Ukraine has the right to maintain a certain number of weapons and a certain number of military? I think that'll be a big point of debate and discussion. And that if Russia will put in writing that Ukraine as a country has the right to have this much of a military force and has the right to maintain this kind of, and maintain certain number of foreign troops or something like that, I think that'll be up for debate as well, in addition to the borders, ultimately. And we will have to see. But I think, the border is the main point of contention, but also how much of a military the Ukrainian government is able to maintain, and what kind of military apparatus they can have. Can they keep the biolabs? Can they keep all kinds of foreign, military assistance, etc.? I think that'll be a point of debate as well.
Yeah, I guess the question is, they have gone so long with this idea that Vladimir Putin wants all of Ukraine. I'm wondering if that's also going to be part of it. Meaning, like, this kind of fantasy that all of this was unprovoked war of aggression. Would that be part of the mix of, hey, we're not taking all of Ukraine, everything is great, so we can move forward?
Well, Russia will be expected to acknowledge Ukraine, and that's the crazy thing, and that actually kind of makes it convenient for Russia, because Russia's never
Yes,
wanted all of Ukraine, right?
exactly.
But that's been the narrative we've all gotten. So if Russia puts in writing, we do not want all of Ukraine. Kiev is independent. Ukraine is an independent country that has the right to exist. If they put all of that in writing, Russia's always said that. But to the Western audience, that sounds like, oh, see, they
Exactly.
made it. So I don't know. I mean, we're in a very strange world, and they do have to save face to some degree. My concern is that it appears that when an actual peace agreement is in the works, I expect all the stops are going to come out. I mean, they're going to call, Trump has sold out Ukraine and sell it, and that's why it's going to be really important for guys like you and me to be out there and just raise from the heavens as loud as we possibly can support for this peace deal. We have to be out there to push back against that. And we have to show public support for ending the war, because they're gonna, that guy who tried to kill Trump, Ryan Roth, I called him a Ukrainiac, Ukraine maniac. The Ukrainiacs are going to be out in full force, screaming. I was at Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearing. They were outside protesting. The Ukrainiacs were out there. Oh my gosh, that they're and the Ukrainiacs are going to be out there like crazy, and they're going to be amplified by mainstream media. And so it's going to be our job to push back against it and show that, no, there are Americans who do want a peace deal and are concerned about the danger of World War III. And we need to be out there. I mean, I'm headed to Minneapolis this weekend, and we're going to be in the streets of Minneapolis on Sunday saying, sign the treaty, peace agreement, in the streets protesting to support, probably be a small demonstration of my organization. We're going out there to have a workshop this weekend. But we're planning on Sunday, after our workshop is over, we're headed to downtown Minneapolis, and we're going to have a small demonstration making clear that we support the peace deal. And we want, the peace talks in Saudi Arabia to continue. We want peace in Ukraine. And I think it's going to be important that other people do the same thing. We have to very loudly make clear we support ending this war, because mainstream media will try to drown out our voices.
I'm fascinated by the Democrats' take on this. It seems to be the most lefty thing in the world to not want a war. And yet, that is not where they are. For them, it is Donald Trump is doing this, because Donald Trump is doing this, it's by definition bad, and that you shouldn't necessarily support and inflame somebody that is an ogre. And I've even had people say, I can't believe that Jamal is simping for Trump. And it's like, dude, I thought the guy should have been put in a cage after he tried to overthrow the election. I'm not simping for anybody. I'm more so ecstatic that a war that has gotten all of these people killed are coming to an end. It's that part. Why do you think there's such a disconnect with that? Is it really just Trump is an ogre, and so you can't necessarily do anything to support Trump? What is your take when people say that about you?
It's a little deeper than that. I think the reason that the mainstream left is so opposed to peace in Ukraine is because the main vehicle that this kind of Eastern establishment, the intelligence apparatus, uses to target countries is the color revolution apparatus, the social justice NGO, folks that get their funding from USAID and run, workshops about feminism and LGBT rights in different countries, and talk about social justice, the human rights activist apparatus, which is very left and liberal in the way it presents itself. That's the main vehicle that carries out these regime change operations. And it views Russia as a target because it's the main servant of U.S. foreign policy. And because of that, they're the ones that are most committed to it. On top of that, Russia has really presented itself as a champion of social conservatism. They don't have gay marriage in Russia. And there's a lot of people from Australia and from Western Europe who've moved to Russia because they're socially conservative, because they don't want their kids to grow up in a society that has gay marriage and things like that. And that the rainbow flags and all of that, they bring in neoliberalism. They bring in market reforms, right? It's not simply about people's freedom and their right to be who they are. It's about tearing down the kind of social fabric that can stand up to neoliberalism and can stand up to Wall Street and can insist on things like guaranteed jobs and healthcare for the population. And that, free market neoliberal economics is brought in with the rainbow flag, right? And so the left has become, really dominated by this intelligence created apparatus that uses, social liberal causes as a vehicle for destabilizing countries. And so Russia has, been standing up against that. Russia has been a target of that. And so Russia really presents itself as being socially conservative. And so we don't have, it used to be left was associated with communism, right? You had the communist parties and they were aligned with the Soviet Union. That's long gone. I mean, that's decades ago, right? So now left is really just synonymous with the color revolution apparatus. And Russia is a main target of that. Russia has been a main institution to push back against that. So it makes sense that the left would be vehemently opposed to Russia. I mean, that's just kind of the situation that we're in. Leftism is really just George Soros ideology at this point. It's not got anything to do with what happened in the 20th century with communism or anything like that. Leftism is it's degrowth, right? The idea there's too many people in the world, we need to reduce the population, climate change. Leftism is cancel culture. Leftism is, tearing people down. Leftism is the kind of shrill, woke atmosphere that's, taken hold. And that's not what, that's certainly not what Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X believed. That's certainly not what the Black Panthers believed. That's certainly not what the labor unions of the 1930s were built on. This new left or woke is a whole new invention that is purely intelligence controlled, I would argue, and is just a vehicle for spreading regime change and instability and asserting control by the big monopolies. And that ideology is something Russia has very much stood against.
So that's why you get the Democratic Party that seems to be so over the top anti-Russian that it goes beyond just this idea of what leftism used to be. It's this kind of new norm in regards to what leftism is that has a bunch of value sets that go along with. Because you're right, I'm always confused by it on some level because it's not just one thing. It's a body of ideas that you need to accept in order to play in that club. And I find that to be so strange. Like, to me, it's like, okay, if you can end the war, that's a good thing. Call it a day. That's a good thing. Or whoever is doing it, that's a good thing. That's the way I look at it. That's not the way they look at it. And you see it on shows like The Young Turks. You see it on shows like Sam Cedar. All of these guys, they have a very specific ideology and a body of ideas that you either take it all or you take none of it. To me, that makes no sense because I don't think human beings function that way. I think part of the reason that shows like Joe Rogan, part of the reason, even Tucker Carlson, is because people tend to function, they have points of view that vary. Meaning it's not they're carrying one body of ideas and this body of ideas is the only thing that makes you elect. No, they're going to be something on the right on, something to the left on. I'm a person. How do you think that migrated? I mean, do you think that's just an intelligence creation or do you think that was organic? Give me a framing on that.
Well,
I think it was a weird conversation, but I am curious on your take.
I view what you can call the left now, the woke left, the synthetic left, whatever you want to call it. I view that as a three-stage formation. First, you had an effort by the CIA during the 1950s to create space between the kind of intellectuals and scientists and engineers and smart people who became communists and the Soviet Union. Right. It was during the 1950s, even at the height of McCarthyism, the Soviet Union was able to have a huge conference at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. And Albert Einstein got up and supported them. And, Aaron Copland got up and supported them. And some of the smartest actors and writers and musicians and scientists and intellectuals in the United States got up and defended the Soviet Union at the Waldorf Peace Conference. And the CIA was furious about this. And they said, how can this be? So they started funneling money to a program they created called the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And it was basically CIA money, along with money from the Rockefellers and the Ford Foundation. And they were subsidizing intellectuals that were leftists, that were critical of U.S. society, critical of U.S. militarism, critical of U.S. consumerism, that were anti-communist and against the Soviet Union. And they waged kind of cancel culture campaigns against different intellectuals like Albert Einstein, against Lillian Hellman, the playwright, against others who were sympathetic with the Soviet Union. And it was kind of an attempt to kind of nudge leftist politics in a new direction. That was stage one. After a while, you had the 1960s and all of that. They realized that exporting these people and, sending this project of kind of a leftism that had been kind of reinvented by American intelligence and the Frankfurt School, sending that around the world was a very useful vehicle for destabilizing the communist countries. And you had the Prague Spring in Czechoslovakia in 1968, where these people that were aligned with Dubček, who was a leader who took power in Czechoslovakia, who was against the Soviet Union, they were presented almost like hippies, right? They were young people or long hair, with flowers, protesting the tanks and all of that. And they realized that like this left-wing aesthetic was very useful in demonizing the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union ended up sending soldiers to Czechoslovakia to put down the uprising, and they were able to frame it as these are young people who believe in peace and all of that. And it was kind of brilliant staging. And then you had the color revolutions of the 1980s that were largely, it was these kind of like liberal activist NGO people. They weren't Soviet hardline communists. It was this new kind of leftism that had been a reinvention of leftism was very useful in setting the stage for overthrowing the various Eastern European Marxist governments. And George Soros paid for it. He funded art galleries, and he funded all kinds of efforts to court various young people, usually the most privileged people in the former socialist countries, the children of the party elite who were going to universities, and the artists, the filmmakers, and others, and subsidizing their work and courting them and hearing their grievances and amplifying their grievances against the system and all of that. And so that was stage two, was the creation of, with this kind of fake left creating an apparatus to destabilize countries. I would argue that then in 2008, when the U.S. economy crashed, there was a lot of instability potentially falling out of the financial crisis. The USA has really never recovered from that, I don't think. I mean, 2008 was a long time ago, but we haven't gotten better. I don't think we've ever really recovered. I think that color revolution apparatus came home, and Barack Hussein Obama, a guy who had taught classes for the Ford Foundation and at Acorn and was part of that apparatus and had gone to various countries to organize color revolutions. And his mother was a researcher for the Ford Foundation, and his stepfather was involved in the military coup that overthrew the Indonesian government in 1965. And Barack Obama, who is part of that apparatus, was brought home, and with social media, with these new inventions called Facebook and Twitter, they brought that apparatus back to the United States to assert control. And that the color revolution apparatus came home in an attempt to control U.S. society, because you had the Tea Party and you had a lot of these lower level capitalists that weren't going to let Barack Obama do, healthcare reform, regulate Wall Street, because they viewed it as a threat to their profits. And so in a hope of stabilizing the U.S. country, and after the financial crisis, they brought the color revolution apparatus back to the United States. And that's what woke really is when it gets down to it. And I saw this in real time. I was part of Occupy Wall Street, and I saw how there were a bunch of people from Eastern Europe who said, if you ask them what they'd done, I helped overthrow Milosevic, and I helped overthrow and now I'm here, occupying Wall Street and controlling leftist politics in a way that it was very much this degrowth ideology, this pessimism, this obsession with gender, this obsession with LGBT, et cetera. And that color revolution apparatus was brought home. And that's what we can call the left today, is very much that. And that's where it came from. And that's why the Democratic Party is more pro-war at this point. It's just completely consumed by this apparatus that was created. With government money and USAID and all of that, they've created a whole apparatus, and that apparatus is what the left is. And Donald Trump and Elon Musk are pulling the plug on it. They're trying to cut off the funding for their own political reasons. It makes sense.
Caleb, man, always appreciate you joining me. I always appreciate these conversations. Caleb Maupin, he's a speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, author. His most recent book, I'm going to let you tell them for it. I don't have it written down here, but you can follow Caleb on Twitter at Caleb Maupin and read his articles at calebmaupin.com. You should also check out, what is it? Center for American Progress. It's not Center for American Progress.
Center for Political Innovation is our
Center for Political Innovation.
CPIUSA.org. Center for Political Innovation. We are doing great stuff, having workshops all over the country, and we are the Center for Political Innovation.
And we'll be in Minneapolis.
This weekend.
This weekend
we're having a workshop on Saturday, and then we're going to be having a small rally somewhere in Minneapolis, unannounced on Sunday. So it's going to be fun. So I'm looking forward to it. There's a lot of people in this country who really like what we have to offer. We're pro-growth, we're optimistic, and we do want a government of action that fights for working families. We're not part of this fake left apparatus, but we certainly don't believe that getting the government out is the solution, right? We want a government of action that fights for working families, and we're innovating. We're in a new period where old formulas don't work. We're innovating for our new times. And so I hope that people can check out what we put out as CPI. We have a lot of great people working with us, people like Peter Coffin and others. You were at our event in DC. We have an optimistic message that is very unique in American politics at this time.
And needed. I appreciate that meeting in DC. I appreciated the people you brought together, and I appreciated the message. So, Caleb, thank you for this, man. Caleb Maupin, definitely check him out. The man is awesome. Like I said, everything that comes out of his mouth, I agree with your take on this stuff. Thank you for this, Caleb.
Sure thing. Thank you.
All right.